Good day, patrons. Welcome to the November tutorial. I'm here in my bedroom in the drafty old Craftsman home here in Los Angeles, and it's below 70 degrees, so I'm trying to pretend that it's wintertime. I got my hoodie on, my stocking cap. I'm going to have to chalk a certain amount of that off to chalking it up to Midwestern upbringing. This time of year, you gain a few more pounds and all you want to eat is stew. But avocados are still ripe on the tree, and the sun is shining, and I don't have any long johns in sight. So life is good. In lockdown or out of lockdown, I'm just so happy to be here with you all. Thank you very much for your support. I'll keep saying it. I really appreciate it. And of course, I wouldn't be doing this if it. I couldn't be doing this if it weren't for you. So thank you, fans. I appreciate it. Today we're going to be talking about my songwriting, and I would like you to please note that this does not necessarily denote how I will approach songwriting going forward, but rather more so talking about what my songwriting process has been like up to this point. That being said, I am currently processing some new ideas about a new direction in my work, and I am a person who can't help but talk through ideas as they come to me. Therefore, you may hear me mention how I intend to write in the future, albeit with ideas that are not yet fully formed. Now, to understand my songwriting, it's important to mention that it is no one style, no one vision, but rather a series of evolutionary processes resulting from, amongst other things, the following. What music am I listening to? What I have experienced? What I have been experiencing? What I am longing to experience or am seeking. Another note, I can be a product of my environment. I suppose like we all can, but that means for me, I write better in certain geographical locations and also at different times of the day. Of course, I have learned many preferences, but rarely am I in a place geographically that I cannot write. It's my own mental hurdles and also certain people that have had a tendency to drastically affect my moods negatively. It is my own sour mood and negative people that I have in the past let affect my life negatively and therefore hinder my creative output. To get the greater context of my songwriting evolution, let's go back to the beginning to when I was a solo musician. Pretty much just had been playing on the street as for all my gigs, and with the exception of a short stint in a little bluegrass band out of Wisconsin called the Schwillbillies. And that was over pretty much by the time I was 20 years old. Only lasted about a year, because up to that point I was only into bluegrass. This band was pretty much a bluegrass band, and from the bluegrass music I had been obsessed with from the time of 16 until this point of 20 years old, where I started to get more into old-time fiddle music, I shifted from the mandolin to the fiddle. I was writing songs, a lot of fiddle tunes and mandolin tunes, a lot of instrumentals, or instrumentally minded, and then adding melodies to them in the way that you would hear old bluegrass songs or specifically old-time fiddle tunes, where the vocal melody is very much exactly the same as the instrumental melody that's being played in between the vocals. So very traditional in respects to, Scotch-Irish and English folk tunes, which of course have greatly introduced American or influenced American folk music. But I wanted to, I guess as I went on, I felt I had more things to say lyrically, and I also felt that the instruments, mandolin and fiddle, were somewhat hindrances to playing and singing at the same time. And I was a one-man band, so fiddle and mandolin by itself, it's just, I needed a rhythm instrument, more of a rhythm instrument. And at the same time, thank God, was starting to fall in love with country blues, which is like playing piano and guitar, so it's a one-man band type thing. But I was also listening to a lot of traditional jazz, so that the mindset was, if I'm going to play by myself, I want to be able to play with the same kind of energy and fervor as a full band. But I was very much still rooted in the pursuit of my poetry. Songwriters like Bob Dylan, who I loved even before I started falling in love and playing bluegrass music. Tom Waits, people like that. So my music was I wanted to go back to the lyrical driven music that I first fell in love with, and away from the fiddle and bluegrass minded music that I was writing in my first band. So hence all those things, hence the record Marmalade, which has been out of print for years. Good luck if you find it. I hope you don't spend too much money on it, and I wish I could help you out with some copies. Some people have asked when I'm going to repress it. No idea. I'm too concerned with writing newer stuff, but we'll get to that later. So then, from Marmalade going into Beat, Move, and Shake, I was definitely more country blues minded, ragtime, traditional jazz minded. So you can see that if you've heard the records Marmalade, if you compare the Marmalade with the ballads, the folkier kind of rock and roll influenced ballads with Beat, Move, and Shake. Now, going from these first two records, and you see through, and you may hear kind of on this newer record that I'm working on now, minimalism has always been my thing. Just because you hear an idea doesn't mean that you have to, that's always going to be the best thing for the specific song or for the recording itself. I like the idea of enhancing your weaknesses. I mean, I'm not by any means a technically gifted singer, I would say. It's always been about style for me and expression and emotion. That's the art that I've always been attracted to, not the people that sing with, perfect pitch and stuff like that. It's people that can make you feel a certain way. They can go right to your soul. That's what's always been my intention. I haven't gotten there, but I think I've fallen short greatly. If I'm being perfectly honest with you, up to my own standards, I think I've fallen short most of the time. But again, that's my intention. Beat, Move, and Shake was a bridge between Marmalade into having a backing band. So Beat, Move, and Shake was exposed. I finally saw, okay, my music's to the point where I need a band again. And crazy, I was busking on the street in Nashville, North Carolina, playing some of those songs that you hear on Beat, Move, and Shake and Marmalade. And South City 3 was touring through while they're playing in a different band, and saw me playing, loved what I did, struck up a conversation. We started talking about St. Louis, and next thing you know, I'm playing in St. Louis a few months later and fell in love with the guys in St. Louis and started going there a lot, and that's when our musical relationship began. So then I started writing songs with everything before that. Of course, you can't get rid of it. It's always going to be there, whether you realize it or not. But with the intention of writing for this band. Harmonica, upright bass, and a second guitar, Adam's guitar. So that's why you see Riverboat Soul, and that's why you see Middle of Everywhere. And even the self-titled record, Polka of Hearts. But that first record, Riverboat Soul, I think is the most defined idea for writing for the South City 3. And at that point, I was very, very present and very intentional and very inspired to write with, but especially for those guys and for us together. And they greatly informed my songwriting and greatly informed the sound. We were definitely a cohesive unit. Now, there's a lot of ideas of other instruments I was writing for, but it was very intentional to not have those instruments in there, again, to accentuate our limitations, if you will. So instead of horns, we have a harmonica. Instead of a steel guitar and a piano, we have a guitar, we have a harmonica, whatever, All the other lead instruments you could throw on there, we just kept it with the four of us. And I think that's really cool. We could look at a lot of different instruments, or a lot of different bands, I should say, throughout time, and whether they realize it or not, they're probably writing with the same mentality because they have their thing. That's their style. And that's very special. That's an identity. I do think that's part of how you get your identities. You stick with what you love, and you, in this case, accentuate your limitations. When you get into Pokey Lafarge, a self-titled record, into Something in the Water and Manic Revelations, Manic Revelations is kind of a different thing, but Pokey Lafarge record was another transition where I saw myself having more of the orchestra. I really wanted to have an orchestra, so I was kind of starting to. We see that record has like half horns and half South City 3, because it's a bridge into Something in the Water, which is mostly horns. And actually, the South City 3 only play on Something in the Water in about 2 or 3, three songs. So come Something in the Water, that's when I started to transition away from the South City 3. If I'm being perfectly honest, wasn't just musical. There was some social things that I just felt like I was pulling away from the band, and I needed to move on to be happy. I think I waited too long to make that decision, and I suffer greatly for it. But I'm better for it now. But I'm just being perfectly honest with you. I think at that point, perhaps the suffering was more so in the throngs of suffering. Everything is going to suffer. The way you deal with people and your work, my creativity is going to suffer. And I think Something in the Water was a special little place where I still hold that record in very high regard. I don't really like any of the records I've made, but I really like Something in the Water. I really think that's a special thing. And that was also the first record I made up in Chicago with all the Fat Babies guys and Joel Patterson and the Modern Sounds and High Style Studios and Alex Hall doing everything that he does behind the drums and the keys and singing and of course behind the controls. He engineered the record. Jimmy Sutton produced that record. So this is a special combination. A lot of things came together there. Manic Revelations was sort of that was a record that I think that is a perfect example of not fully formed ideas and just a lot of conflict, and somehow I was still able to be very prolific through it all and write songs and finish songs, but not really fully formed ideas. I think that there's some good songs in there, at least I should say, at least good ideas. But I don't think all in all it's a very great record. That being said, I do think it's been, if I'm being honest, I do think it's kind of underappreciated. Or you could also say kind of it's been a lack of respect for that record amongst my own fans for a myriad of reasons, perhaps, and I'm willing to be accountable for some of their feelings. But not delving in too much into personal things, Rock Bottom Rhapsody then is a big record for me because it was yet another transition, not immediately a great one. Well, I should say immediately a great one. I'd moved on from the band. I'd fallen in love, only to kind of sabotage that relationship. All these different things kind of informed the record, but more so the moving on from the band and the falling in love and the asking some bigger questions without really any foundation for coming to any truth. But really, it was the aftermath of sabotaging that relationship that I recorded it. And this was a record I wrote with Chris Seafried, produced by Chris Seafried, recorded again in Chicago. A second record recorded in Chicago. And this is where you start to see a lot more of the... you see some blues influences and things like that, and some country influences, some more solo influences that you kind of started to see in Manic Revelations. But also some people, I think, misinterpret the soul influences because actually a lot of it is rocksteady, which is roots reggae recorded in the 60s and 70s, which was greatly influenced by American soul music. Whereas the rocksteady stuff from Jamaica in the 60s and 70s were just turning the soul beat around from the 50s and 60s, I took it and flipped it back around and put it into my own thing. So I don't know if that makes sense to you, but if you need to listen to some rocksteady stuff, which I would greatly suggest, listen to Alton Ellis, the Paragons, and maybe even some instrumental ska stuff like Roland Alfonso. I was listening to a lot of that stuff when I was writing Manic Revelations, but Rock Bottom Rhapsody was also a manifestation of some of those influences. And the first record I made fully away from the South City 3. Now going into the new record I'm writing, or that I'm almost finished with, since I couldn't tour on Rock Bottom Rhapsody after its release on April of this year, I decided to write a new record with some of the renewed perspectives that I was having musically and spiritually and creatively, and also socially, seeing as how it was in the middle of the pandemic. I endeavored to write more consciously about that, but not so literally. I think writing about things too literally, a lot of times when you gab it on the nose, topical songs, they just don't have much interest to me, and of course they lose weight very soon, a few years down the line. I prefer to write things from a timeless place. Certainly love is something like that, anguish, suffering, traveling songs, and other timeless things. I definitely was starting to feel more free and a little bit more grounded in my faith, and moving on from and processing, but moving away from the shame and the turmoil from that the shame caused, in this case self-sabotage, and stepping sort of into the light of redemption that I have found through my salvation and following God more consciously. But again, not writing things literally, but rather writing things poetically, getting a little bit deeper and not so much on the surface. So that is how you can write songs more for open to interpretation. If you're not just writing like, I am happy, but more so just writing using symbolism and using metaphors to describe that feeling, and that way people can pull from it what they want and interpret it and use it for however they want. A song can be a tool. It's not about mixed messages. It's about being malleable, and for people to, again, take it and use it for how they see fit, hopefully to benefit their life. Now, people misunderstand songs all the time from my direct intention, but my direct intention is not necessarily for people. It has been for me, selfishly. It has been for me in the past. Now, this record that I'm working on is definitely has more of a Latino influence, as I've been listening to a lot of vallenato music and different and son cubano and different types of música de latina. I felt like for years that the South City 3 just wanted to play fast all the time, whereas I was trying to pull back and relax and have more of a groove. I think rarely are the best songs fast ones, man. They're almost always, slow with a nice steady groove, sneaky good songs. That's what I want to write, sneaky good songs. Maybe I'll call the new record Sneaky Good. But going into this new perspective for songwriting, I don't want to write for me so much anymore. I've been there, done that, and I have no intention on self-sufficiency. I do believe that I have to be reliant on God, on the one who created us, and use my voice for the embetterment of mankind. So no more writing about. I don't want to write songs anymore that glorify my turmoil, because I think people can perceive those as being like a positive mentality, or I should say a mantra for themselves. Take Fuck Me Up, for instance. That song is not supposed to be championing going out there and finding something to fuck you up and get fucked up by, because that just causes you to fuck other people up. That song was about, honestly, was about suffering, inner turmoil. And I have a song on this new record that's slamming. It's called Finding Me, and it could be perceived as the same way. So I have to be very careful about what I write now, because I'm very aware of the responsibility that I have, which is to protect the way that I think, and to protect what I say, and protect what I do, because I know that it affects everybody throughout the world, because we're all connected like grapes on a vine. So interested to see how that happens going forward, as I start to write songs more as like psalms, more as like prayers, and more about lifting up humanity as opposed to glorifying the darkness. Because being depressed sucks. You can make it through that. You don't have to be a product of this world. Feeling joy, experiencing joy, and sharing that with the world, that's a beautiful thing. And that's what that's the trip I'm on from now on. That's my mentality. So I'm excited to see where that goes, and excited to see how that relationship grows between me and you, between us, me and my fans. So again, thank you very much for this opportunity to speak to you today. Thank you if you made it to the end of this long video. I'm going to sign out now. This has been Pokio Farge for the November tutorial on songwriting. Take care, y'all.